President Ronald Regan stymied, written by Sri K. Natwar Singh. I first set foot in the White House, the official residence of the President of the United States, in November 1963. It was a sad day. The world was in mourning. The sun had set abruptly and cruelly on Camelot. Vijayalakshmi Pandit was representing India at President John F. Kennedy's funeral in Washington. I accompanied her. October 1987 was a happier occasion. Rajiv Gandhi, after participating in the Commonwealth Summit in Vancouver, flew to Washington, D.C. to parley with President Ronald Reagan. We were received at Andrews Air Base by Secretary of State George Shultz. The formal ceremonial reception was the next day at the White House. Reagan and Rajiv Gandhi made brief statements. These included calculated ambiguity and avoidance of any commitment. There were no new ideas. The established rules of diplomacy were observed. Before the two delegations met at a plenary session, Rajiv Gandhi and Ronald Reagan met one on one at the Oval Office. Sensitive issues like the Nuclear Non Proliferation Treaty, Kashmir, the US role in Latin America were taken up. The President, although 33 years senior to the Prime Minister, asked him to call him Ron. The PM asked the President to call him Rajiv. Mrs. Indira Gandhi had been very formal in this regard. No question of her being on first names with either Reagan or Nixon. Always Mr. President. They too stuck to Madam Prime Minister. Ron and Rajiv got on famously. They were comfortable in each other's company. Reagan was an accomplished raconteur. At the plenary session, the two leaders were assisted by their principal advisers. On the American side, Vice President George W. Bush, General Colin Powell, banker John Whitehead, Ambassador Michael Armacost, and the US Ambassador to India, John Gunther Dean. On the Indian side, apart from me, were Pratap Kaul, our man in Washington, Foreign Secretary K.P.S. Menon, Joint Secretaries P.K. Singh and Ronen Sen, and Media Advisor Sharad Prasad. The atmosphere was pleasant. No discordant note, no tension. Ronen and PK took notes. The Americans were less diligent. Modern technology did their work for them. The conference room was bugged and everything said was recorded, including presidential conversations. The plenary session was followed by lunch. As we were going into the dining room, President Reagan went into a huddle with Bush Sr. and Whitehead. There was nothing for the Indian side to do except wait. What had happened that was so vital that the President had to abandon his Indian guests? We didn't have to wait long. Reagan walked up to Rajiv Gandhi, apologized, then informed him that the market had crashed. The Hong Kong Stock Exchange had stopped transactions. Regan was asked whether Wall Street would follow suit. For the time being, he had decided against it and would wait and see. Bush Sr. asked Rajiv Gandhi to be excused for a few minutes to speak to the Treasury Secretary. It must be said for President Reagan that not for a moment did he appear worried or preoccupied during the lunch. His composure was impressive. Bush Sr. rejoined us. All was almost well. Whitehead then left. He was more suited to finance than to foreign affairs. He had been a stockbroker and was the right person to keep track of the financial earthquake. The menu was not ducal, but neither was it austere. Wines, red or white, were forbidden for the Indian side. The pantry was close by, and it comforted me to no end to hear the din emanating from the quarter. It felt like home. Despite Wall Street, the mood at lunch was relaxed, even jovial. The president was in good form. We were aware of his impressive stock of amusing anecdotes and jokes. He told them with an actor's verbal skill. Anyone with a sense of humor delighted Rajiv Gandhi. After the first course, President Reagan was in his element. His jokes about Gorbachev and Margaret Thatcher were out of the top drawer. It was obvious that he was himself the author of these amusing nuggets. Rajiv Gandhi nudged me. I produced one. It was mildly naughty. KPS Menon Jr. also contributed another. Mr. Reagan then changed gear. He said to Rajiv Gandhi that earlier in the week he had met a remarkable and courageous Chinese lady. She had suffered and survived the Cultural Revolution in China. Her daughter had been driven to her death. This lady was now living in Washington. She had written a book about her hair raising experiences. Reagan then paused. That gave me an opening. I said, Mr. President, the lady's name, if I am not mistaken, is Nayan Cheng. Her book, Life and Death in Shanghai, is a deeply moving account and indictment of the Cultural Revolution. It is a triumph of the human spirit. The President had not expected this. KPS Menon referred to the lady as having appeared at the Indian consulate in Shanghai. This was one of the crimes she was accused of. She had written about it in her book. Our American friends began to look at us rather incredulously. Next, P.K. Singh also pointed to another incident in the book. 3 out of 6 members of Rajiv Gandhi team had read the book. Not one among the Americans. President Reagan thereafter left the topic of Mrs. Chang. He pulled out a notebook from his pocket and sprang a surprise on us. His friends in California had asked him to inquire from Mr. Gandhi why India was not buying Californian almonds anymore. This stumped us. None of us knew. One for the Americans. After the lunch, Ambassador John Gunther Dean caught me by the elbow. How the hell did you guys know the president was going to speak about that Chinese female? Smugly, I replied, John, as good diplomats, we had come prepared for all eventualities except Californian almonds. Thank you for listening. Now, some of the words and their meanings. President Ronald Regan stymied. Stymie means to prevent someone from achieving a purpose. The sun had set abruptly and cruelly on Camelot. Camelot means a time of idyllic happiness, a time of great excitement in America. October 1987 was a happier occasion. Rajiv Gandhi, after participating in the Commonwealth Summit in Vancouver, flew to Washington DC to parley with President Ronald Reagan. Parley means a discussion with two groups of people, especially one that is intended to end an argument. Ron and Rajiv got on famously. They were comfortable in each other's company. Regan was an accomplished raconteur. Raconteur means a person who tells anecdotes in a skillful and amusing way. The atmosphere was pleasant. No discordant note. Discordant means disagreeing. The Americans were less diligent. Modern technology did their work for them. Diligent means careful and using a lot of effort. What had happened that was so vital that the president had to abandon his Indian guests? Vital means absolutely necessary, extremely important. It must be said for President Reagan that not for a moment did he appear worried or preoccupied during the lunch. His composure was impressive. Composure means the feeling of being calm, confident, and in control. The menu was not ducal, but neither was it austere. Ducal means like a duke. Duke means a man of very high rank in a country. Austere means very simple. After the first course, President Reagan was in his element. In his element means in a situation you know well and enjoy. His jokes about Gorbachev and Margaret Thatcher were out of the top drawer. Out of top drawer means from an elite social class, the highest level rank. He was himself the author of these amusing nuggets. Nugget means a valuable idea or fact. Thank you very much.